These are 10 of Mr. Burns' best episodes. In Monty Burns' fleeing circus, the Simpsons need Mr. Burns' help rebuilding Springfield after a donut-related tragedy, and he uses this opportunity to recapture some of his youth. The Simpson family is walking through town, because they need to find the car after Homer forgot where he parked it last night, when they suddenly come across a shocking scene.
The sun is shining, birds are singing, people are staring up at the sky in terror.
It turns out that the iconic Lard Lad statue is missing. Half the town wants to riot about it, but an equal half doesn't want to riot, resulting in $0 worth of damage in the end. Thanks, non-rioters. The reason why the statue is missing is that it's being rebranded and updated, and soon enough, the new focus group statue is unveiled to the town to mixed results. At least until Lisa convinces them to give it a chance, that is.
Fine, but maybe this will grow on you.
We love it! Yeah!
But then Professor Frink points out that the statue is a massive concave reflective surface that ends up destroying Springfield by creating a laser beam. That's what you get for listening to focus groups. Afterwards, Mayor Quimby promises that he will rebuild the ruined town. Obviously, Quimby's promise is never fulfilled, not even after 6 months. So, the Simpsons decide to ask if Mr. Burns will help Springfield instead.
Smithers, where is the damn trapdoor button?
Obviously, Burns is gonna say no, but surprisingly decides to help the town after remembering something from his childhood, but only on one condition.
I want to put on a variety show at the bowl. A celebration of everything wonderful about... what's the name of this town again?
Springfield, sir.
After helping rebuild the Springfield Bowl, Burns begins holding auditions for his Springfield Follies show. But Burns remembers the 1913 Pee-wee pageant show again, and more specifically, an interesting interaction with his mother.
Who likes mommy's licks? Monty likes mommy's licks. Lickety-lickety-lick.
Because he was her little butterscotch drop, you see, so it wasn't weird or anything. So, Burns decides that he wants the show to be a child pageant show instead, and heads to Springfield Elementary to find high-spirited kids who are willing to work 18 hours a day, just like in 1913.
Attention, an old man is prowling the school looking for young children. Please perform for him.
After assembling his cast, Lisa helps Mr. Burns with something trivial and becomes his assistant director. Lisa takes this opportunity to find out Burns' true motive, so she won't be able to perform on the show herself.
There's no room in my show for Adolf Sax's vile-sounding O-phone.
Do you ever say anything in a simple way?
When Burns isn't satisfied with the kids during rehearsals, he remembers how he was laughed off the stage in the past.
Well, it's called laughter. You're a laughingstock, Charles.
Oh, it's awful.
You know, there's really nothing funny about a crowd of people laughing at a crying child. Unless it's a cartoon, then it's hilarious. Upset that no show could ever be good enough, Burns starts ramping up demands. Then, Burns abruptly cancels the entire event after Lisa points out how impossible his demands are.
Thanks a lot, Lisa. We were getting out of school for this.
Lisa later asks Mr. Burns to return, but he refuses. Lisa also notices strange lines on his face. Realizing what those lines are, Mr. Smithers shows Lisa an old mutoscope. Google it, kids. And Lisa watches footage of what happened to Mr. Burns all those years ago, that his suspenders fell down, and the entire crowd laughed at his bare butt. Yeah, I admit, that is pretty embarrassing.
So this is what made Mr. Burns the monster he is.
Knowing the truth, Lisa convinces Burns to put his play back on. So, we then see the night of the big show with singing and magic tricks.
This is just a simple twins trick. They pulled the other twin out of the tank behind the curtain.
After an unscheduled fireworks show, Lisa thinks that the performance is over.
No, it's not fair! I was good!
Arnold!
Homer!
Did I forget to mention the power plant catching on fire, because Burns wasn't there to threaten his employees. Whoops. But Burns has other plans, and he suddenly dons the same weird little sailor boy's outfit from before, and tries to recorrect his mistake from his youth. And while Lisa tries to give him a chance,
You! Mr. Burns can't take the impact of that many photons. Those light-shining fools!
Burns ends up burning his pants off, exposing his rear end to the crowd and getting laughed at all over again. Furious, Burns turns his rage toward Lisa instead.
Well, you'd better know this, mister. This town has my back. And hey, where did they go? How did 15,000 people leave so fast?
But Burns quickly calms down, because someone his age can't say anything about anything anymore. And things come to a close as he impatiently agrees to listen to Lisa play her saxophone. And that's the moral lesson for the first episode on our list. If you had a bad childhood, don't make it everyone else's problem. Otherwise, you'll just look like a selfish jerk. Or maybe it was to do whatever you want and not care if people laugh at you as long as it makes you happy. Either way, in this next episode, we'll go from seeing Burns as a bully to Burns as the bullied, at least for one short and sweet moment, where Homer only mostly thinks that he's accidentally killed his boss. Who hasn't been there, right? Up next is Homer the Smithers, where we'll get to see Mr. Smithers have a mental breakdown, Homer take his place as assistant to Mr. Burns, and Lenny being drunk. Although that last one might be too commonplace to be worth mentioning, oh well. The episode begins with Mr. Burns hosting an employee appreciation night for all the power plant workers and their families at a drag racing track.
Our first race is a benefit for Daredevil, who's hospitalized with cirrhosis of the liver. Liver!
After the event's over, Burns is waiting in his limo for Smithers to get him a novelty foam finger, because the last one was just too ostentatious. Then, all of a sudden, a drunken Lenny shows up, just trying to thank his boss for a great night out, which ends up terrifying Mr. Burns. Smithers feels guilty over the incident and laminates Burns' newspaper the next morning to make up for it. This fails too, so Smithers tries to drown himself in a water cooler, forcing Burns to take action.
No, don't make me take a vacation. Without you, I'll wither and die.
That's a risk I'm willing to take.
Although he's forced to take a vacation, Smithers still doesn't want to be outshined, so he finds the most incompetent, dim-witted replacement he can get, Homer Simpson. After giving Homer a brief instruction on the 2,800 small jobs he'll have to do as Burns' assistant, Smithers leaves Mr. Burns in Homer's perfectly capable hands.
Oh, just my luck.
Well, okay, we'll settle on partially capable. In no time at all, Homer's life takes an uncomfortable turn. Now he has to wake up at 4:30 in the morning just to get to Burns' mansion in time to make him breakfast. But despite all his efforts to please his boss, Homer still can't seem to win over Burns, which becomes clear when Mr. Smithers calls to check in on things.
This Simpson fellow seems to be getting dumber by the minute. I've never seen anything quite like it. Anywho, you just enjoy your vacation.
Geez, poor Homer. And the worst part is, it's only gonna get worse from here.
I asked for light starch on my nightcap. You call this postum? You call this a tax return?
After so much of Burns' abuse, Homer finally has enough and snaps, just like Smithers. Well, actually not exactly like Smithers. Can't really blame him though, can you? Homer thinks he's killed Mr. Burns and runs away, but when he goes back to check on him, he finds Burns cowering in a corner.
I'm really sorry I hit you, Mr. Burns. Here, let me put some salt on that eye.
No, please. I can't bear another thrashing. Just leave me be.
Yes, sir.
After getting Homer to leave, he tries to call Smithers. But since Burns has apparently never used a phone himself before, he can't really figure it out.
Oh, Smithers, if only you could hear me.
Something tells me Mr. Burns needs me.
Who needs a vacation anyway? They're overrated, if you ask me. Still terrified of Homer, Mr. Burns even makes his own coffee after a lot of trial and error from the looks of it. He even refuses Homer's offer to drive him home, insisting on doing it himself.
I can't believe it. All my life I've avoided doing things for myself. But I'm actually enjoying this.
But as terrifying as the elderly being allowed to drive may be, it turns out being punched by Homer was actually a good thing for Mr. Burns. Soon he's learned how to shred files and even use his own phone. Unfortunately, this revelation comes at the worst possible time, at least for Smithers anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my God. I knew I shouldn't have laughed.
And if you thought that was bad enough, just listen to what Burns has to say next.
And my dear, dear Smithers, you're no longer needed at all. You're fired. Ta.
Smithers goes around town trying to find a new job. Among other things, he tries to be the announcer at the racetrack, but nothing works out for him.
People are already here. We don't need to keep hustling them like this, do we? You let go of me. Where are you throwing?
When Smithers tries applying for a job to keep Barney from drinking the midnight beer delivery, which I hope comes with benefits, a guilt-ridden Homer inspires him to get his old job back. With Homer's help, Smithers tries to prove that Burns still needs him by initiating the one thing Burns can't handle: a phone call from his 122-year-old mother.
That improvident lackwit, always too busy striding about his atom mill to call his own mother.
I didn't know that both of the first two episodes would feature Burns' mom when we started, by the way, or that she'd become so southern as time went by. Of course, Homer screws up the plan by accidentally disconnecting the call and trying to impersonate Burns' mother instead. Burns catches them and says he's glad he fired Smithers after this, but the last straw finally breaks when Homer just has to open his big mouth as well.
You really blew it this time, Smithers.
This one remark causes Smithers to attack Homer, and the two start fist-fighting across Burns' office. The fight suddenly ends when Burns gets hurt by accidentally being knocked out of the office window. But as it turns out, this is the best thing that could have happened for Smithers, as once again, Burns needs to rely on Smithers due to his injuries. Of course, Smithers also makes sure Homer gets what's coming to him.
What'd you get that for?
For knocking Mr. Burns out of a third-story window?
Makes sense to me. Did he die?
What am I, a doctor?
So, all in all, a happy ending for everybody. You know, besides Burns and his shattered body. And he kinda got whooped in this episode, didn't he? But don't worry, he won't be hurt nearly as bad in this next episode. Well, not physically, but emotionally, that's a whole other story. Moving on, we've got the episode Undercover Burns, where Mr. Burns tries to find out what his employees really think of him by wearing a robot suit to look like some random guy. Yes, that is the plot of this episode. The episode begins at the power plant during Take Your Kids to Work Day, where Mr. Burns has set up various fun attractions, such as a bouncy castle that looks like his head.
Lenny, I didn't know you had kids.
I don't. I hired them to look like I'm a family man.
But things quickly take a turn when the parents leave their kids alone to enjoy the festivities, and Burns reveals this event is actually Put Your Kids to Work Day. All the kids get trapped in self-controlled bumper cars and are sent inside the power plant because their tiny hands are perfectly sized to clean out all the contaminated crevices.
At least this ride doesn't have a creepy song.
You'll work for me or you'll get the lash.
Of course, Lisa is the only one who gets out of the trap, so she chases after Burns to confront him. You know, because child labor is kinda illegal, mostly. But after Burns runs and hides inside a men's restroom, Lisa can only stand to look for him for so long.
Wait, this is a men's room. Ew, ew, ew! Is that a tuna sandwich on the sink?
Burns is about to leave now that Lisa is gone, but he stops when he notices graffiti inside the bathroom stall. Graffiti that is less than flattering, to say the least.
Ooh, something about me. I'll need my cheaters for this.
Burns goes and complains to Smithers about how upset he is over the contempt his employees have for him. Smithers suggests that maybe he could try respecting his employees, especially considering how many have died. But Burns decides to do an undercover boss thing instead, and assembles a team to build him a robo-suit using voice changer chips. And those weird face masks from Mission Impossible.
Say goodbye to Montgomery Burns. Say hello to Fred Cranepool from Turbine Maintenance.
Excellent.
Soon enough, Burns is now undercover as Fred, and he sits down with Homer, Lenny, and Carl during lunch. But before he can dig up any dirt, lunchtime is over. And apparently, this is signaled by the hounds being released.
I heard the craziest thing. Some nuclear plants don't have hounds chasing you.
Different world.
Realizing just how cruel releasing the hounds can be when you're the one being chased by them, Burns hands out buffalo nickels to the other three. But to Mr. Burns' surprise, afterwards, the three actually start treating him like a friend. I know, right? How weird.
All right, to friendship and respect. And also evil. I mean football. Football!
So the guys and Fred start hanging out and doing fun things together, leading to a surprising realization for Burns.
Those idiots like me for me. Fred Cranepool.
Sir, I'm worried. The suit just detected a heartbeat.
Of course, Mr. Smithers can't help but be worried about Burns, considering the others as his friends, especially since he thinks of Burns as more than a friend.
The only union that concerns me now is the Union of Men. What would you know about that?
Keep trying, Smithers. I'm sure you'll get there sooner or later. Sometime later, after Fred aggressively dismisses Smithers, the guys talk Burns into getting them a decent benefits package.
Me? Talk to Burns? I wouldn't. I couldn't. He's He's got the sharpest mind in all 46 states.
But not wanting to disappoint his friends, he agrees to the idea. Then we see the guys listening in as Fred has an argument with Mr. Burns behind closed doors.
Boy, he's really raking Burns over the coals.
Yeah, I like how they're not interrupting each other. So polite.
In the end, Burns agrees to give them their employee benefits. When Smithers confronts him about his change of heart, Burns shockingly reveals that he's done with being Mr. Burns entirely.
Montgomery Burns died when I put on this suit, and 6 other times this week. Thank God for the new liver and kidneys.
I guess that's what happens when you've never had friends in however many years Burns has been alive. Probably a good 130 by now, right? Obsessed with the friendships, Burns keeps making changes to the power plant that are slowly bankrupting it. Soon, Smithers finally pulls Homer aside to reveal the truth, that Fred is Mr. Burns. And he mostly understands the truth, sorta-ish.
You'll end your friendship with Mr. Burns permanently.
No problem, as long as I'm still friends with Fred.
Homer tries to make things right, but Lenny and Carl start talking about how much they hate Burns in front of Fred. And this leads to a brief fight, where Homer rips the arm off of Fred's robot body.
I thought you were my friends. Someone's having a day.
You know what? Seeing an old man cry is never as funny as you think it would be, even if it's Mr. Burns. After Burns runs off, he rips off the Fred suit, but the suit comes alive, and the two begin arguing.
As all my attorneys keep telling me, why won't you die?
Because I'm the last spark of goodness in you.
And as the two of them begin having a dramatic duel, Homer comes in and sees that Burns is just trapped under the Fred suit.
Die.
When Burns asks why he can't be both loved and feared, you know, like God, Homer tells him that employees have always hated the boss since the beginning of time, from caveman times to the Renaissance. Burns realizes that Homer is right. The boss does suck. So, Burns decides to finally rid himself of Fred.
And Fred, the man I could have been, I consigned to the fires of hell.
And so everything goes back to normal, and Burns is back to his old, normal, evil self.
You're back.
Or am I?
So, it just goes to show you that you can't have friends if you're rich and powerful? Yeesh, that's not a very positive ending, is it? Maybe the lesson is just be yourself? But again, the rich and powerful thing. You know what, never mind, let's just move on to the next episode. Lucky for everyone, there's no need for friendship in The Trouble with Trillions, because this episode is all about the two most terrible things in America: taxes and the IRS. Things get started as we see Springfield counting down the last 10 seconds of the new year. But while everyone else in town is busy celebrating the arrival of New Year's Day, Flanders wakes up from the fireworks and realizes that he needs to get his taxes done.
Nettie, it's 8:45. The post office is going to be opening soon.
8:45? Here I am, yapping away like it's 8:35.
After getting all of his taxes written up, Ned rushes to the post office and quickly sends in his mail. Later, on April 15th, aka National Tax Day in the United States, is when we see everyone else in Springfield desperate to mail in their taxes at the last possible minute. Everyone except Homer, because he forgot.
No, because you see, I went ahead and year-wise, I was counting forward from the last previous. No!
So Homer panics and stuffs his crumpled up tax papers into an envelope before rushing out the door, barely making it in time to throw his mail into a cart as the post office starts to close.
Get in there, drop!
Unfortunately, his misshapen envelope bounces into the severe audit section once it reaches the IRS, and soon Homer is taken away by government agents.
No, sir, please. I can't go to prison. They pee in a cup and throw it on you.
But thanks to Homer desperately saying he'll do anything to get out of prison, Homer is instead recruited by Agent Johnson of the FBI and is soon brought in for a top-secret mission.
Mr. Simpson, please cover your ears while I say the secret access word. Cheese.
Good morning, Agent Johnson.
Because if you want anyone for the top-secret government mission, it's obviously the fat drunk guy you dragged out of a bar. The secret tape shows footage from the end of World War II, where President Truman, who was drunk when he made this promise, printed $1 trillion bill to help fund European rebuilding efforts. But it turns out that this bill never arrived to Europe, and the FBI suspects it was stolen by the man who was supposed to deliver it.
The man chosen to deliver this precious cargo to Europe was America's wealthiest and therefore most trustworthy citizen, Sir Montgomery Burns.
Bet you were wondering when he was going to show up in this story, weren't you? Despite it all, Homer is still a good person, so he obviously feels reluctant to go through with the mission.
But Mr. Burns gave me my job, and he hasn't fired me even after 3 meltdowns and 1 China syndrome.
But this is the United States government we're talking about, so Homer can't refuse. So much for the whole land of the free thing. So, later that night, Homer sneaks through the front gate to Burns' mansion as Mr. Smithers drives home and goes up to ring the doorbell.
Employee, eh? What a pleasant surprise. Pack of vicious dogs should be ripping you to pieces.
After that fails, he invites Homer inside. Then, after failing to scald him with boiling water, Burns leaves Homer alone, and he begins his investigation. Homer thinks he's in trouble when Burns catches him snooping, and he nearly takes a suicide pill. Bit much, if you ask me. But it turns out that Burns thinks he's from Collier's magazine, so he decides to show Homer around his mansion himself.
Oh, you'll find this amusing. The suit Charlie Chaplin was buried in.
Burns then shows Homer his Hall of Patriots, filled with statues of Burns' relatives and their patriotic exploits. One such statue is of Burns himself, a weirdly muscular version of himself, but that's not the important part.
It commemorates my liberation of $1 trillion that would have been foolishly squandered. Let's move.
Right as Burns shows Homer the real $1 trillion bill that he keeps in his wallet, the FBI agents come in to arrest him. But when Mr. Burns starts going off about all the things the taxpayer dollars were wasted on, such as nuclear missiles or polish for the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, let's just ignore the last one, Homer feels inspired to help Mr. Burns instead. He just has to remember he's not really a reporter first.
I'm gonna write the best darn article. Oh, wait.
Homer grabs Burns and the briefcase with the $1 trillion bill, and the two flee the scene. Desperate for help, they go to the one man in Springfield who can help them.
You'll be swell. You'll be great. Gonna have the whole world on a plate.
So, after they basically kidnap Mr. Smithers, the three decide that they have to flee the country now that Uncle Sam is hunting them down. Obviously, Homer doesn't love the idea.
But I can't leave the country. What about my wife and kids?
That can be shipped.
But he has little choice at this point. So, the three men soon fly out of the country and eventually end up landing in Cuba. Well, crash landing, actually. But who's keeping track? Once there, Burns decides that they need to see whoever's in charge of the country now that Batista's gone. And I'm sure you can already guess who they're going to see.
Comrades, our nation is completely bankrupt. We have no choice but to abandon communism.
Burns tries to buy themselves a nice place to live in Cuba thanks to the $1 trillion bill, but then Castro says he wants to hold the bill for himself.
Mr. Burns, I think we can trust the president of Cuba.
And the three men quickly find themselves floating in the middle of the ocean on a raft. Gee, who would have thought that Castro would be so untrustworthy? Now that they're here, Homer and Burns both agree that they miss America, even with Smithers reminding Burns of his criminal charges.
If it's a crime to steal $1 trillion from our government and hand it over to communist Cuba, then I'm guilty of that too.
And so, as Mr. Burns proclaims that he's just going to bribe his future jury anyway, the episode comes to an end. And I guess they'll find their way back home one way or another. How hard could it be to float from Cuba to America anyway? But hey, enough about communism, because you know what's even better than loving your country? Falling in love with a beautiful woman, which is what we'll see happen in this next episode. A hunka Burns in love. The fact that guest star Julia Louis-Dreyfus voices the woman doesn't hurt either. This story begins with the Simpson family visiting Chinatown and going to Bob's Big Buddha restaurant for dinner.
Is there any way we can enhance your dining experience by hurting an animal?
No!
You know how when you just say the words Chinese food, you immediately want some yourself? Man, we gotta get through the rest of this video already. I'm starving. Anyway, the family soon finishes their meal and receives their fortune cookies afterward. But Homer complains about the quality of the fortunes they get, leading the restaurant's owner to see if he can do better.
You will be aroused by a shampoo commercial.
That's not bad.
The owner's so impressed, in fact, that he takes Homer to a back room where all the fortunes are written to prove that Homer can do a better job than everyone else.
Okay, let's see. The price of stamps will climb ever higher.
He's like a young me.
Now in charge of writing all the fortunes for the fortune cookies, Homer soon gets to enjoy watching various customers as they read his fortunes. This then leads to Mr. Burns, shocking, I know, getting a fortune of his own after he and Smithers get takeout. A fortune that says he'll find true love on Flag Day. Conveniently, today is Flag Day.
Well, it's just you and me here, sir.
No time for jokes, Smithers. Come along. We're going womanizing.
Oh, goody.
You gotta respect that he keeps trying despite it all. Burns tries flirting with rich women at a fancy party, but the woman he was talking to gets swooped away by Milburn Pennybags. You know, the guy from Monopoly. Don't tell me you didn't know his name. Burns then tries his luck elsewhere, which unwittingly leads him into a strip club. But that doesn't work either, so he leaves loveless once again. But not before we get to see that one Smithers gif.
Smithers?
Burns is ready to throw in the towel, but just before Flag Day is over, Burns comes across a police officer writing up a ticket for his car because he parked in the middle of the dang road. But to his surprise, the officer is a beautiful woman, so Burns doesn't waste any time and asks her out on a date.
Oh, I'm sorry, but you're really not my... Well, okay.
Is that the secret to finding love? Pathetic whimpering? Good to know. Soon, Burns is out on his date with the woman named Gloria, where they have a nice time at an amusement park.
I really feel safe with you. It's like going out with my brother.
Yes, it's going great.
However, later that night when Gloria drops Burns off at home, she tries to shut down any further advances by saying that the age difference is just too much. Luckily for Burns, a guardian angel just happens to run by in the nick of time.
I'm sorry, Monty.
Stop that dog! It has my gum!
Homer gets pulled aside by Burns and is roped into making him sound young and hip by telling Gloria about all of his wild exploits, like how he got shot by a baby and blocked out the sun that one time.
Come on, he's a total player.
Okay, stop kicking my door.
Now, Homer has to come along to help Burns keep up the charade that he's rowdy on his next date to Stu's Disco Club, because nothing screams you're young and hip like disco, right kids? But the plan works out well enough, and Burns takes Gloria back to his place with a little more help from Homer.
I'm going to make such love to you that you'll forget all about Rudolph Valentino. Turn left here.
No problem.
Homer is worried about how exhausted Burns is, but apparently, Burns has a rare and powerful aphrodisiac that he injects into his arm to instantly become energized, before dismissing Homer. And since Homer apparently has no problem with sharing needles, he also helps himself to a hit of the stuff.
I hope the kids didn't hear us.
Wow.
After a few more dates where Homer has to do plenty of the legwork, including bringing Burns back from the dead during one of them, he eventually decides to tell Homer some shocking news.
You're going to ask her to marry you?
Isn't it wonderful? I'm head over heels in love.
So, by hiding a ring inside of a bowling ball like some cheesy Hallmark movie, Burns springs the big question, and Gloria says yes. So Burns goes to get some champagne to celebrate. Bowling alley champagne, I guess. While he's gone, Snake arrives to rob the building but is surprised to see Gloria, his ex-girlfriend. And being the scumbag criminal he is, Snake decides to take Gloria back to his hideout to reconnect.
No, I'm engaged now. My ring!
Let go of her, or I'll scream!
Burns returns and finds Gloria's ring on the ground, and assumes that she's run off with Homer, even though he's met his wife and kids before. But the truth is that now Homer is Snake's hostage along with Gloria, and Snake is as surprised as the rest of us when he learns the truth of their relationship.
He's not my boyfriend. Mr. Burns is. Homer just comes along on our dates and carries us to the bedroom.
Soon, they arrive to Snake's hideout in the sticks, and Snake ties the other two up to a chair, but even with all of his efforts, Gloria still isn't impressed by Snake.
You know what would be surprising? A foot massage.
Shut up.
Go!
Thanks to some help from Cletus, the police are able to track down Burns' stolen car, but they still think that Homer is the one who kidnapped Gloria, not Snake.
Oh, that's a sweet shot. He's tied to a chair.
That means Dad's not a kidnapper, he's a hostage.
Wait, how did Lisa get here? While Snake is still trying to win Gloria back, Homer tries to use an open fire from an old-school furnace to burn through his ropes. But the problem with the idea is, well, it's Homer.
Just a little more. Oh, wait.
Homer and Snake manage to run outside, but Gloria is still trapped inside, so Burns decides to step up to save Gloria himself.
You. No offense, but you're a decrepit monkey skeleton.
Perhaps, but this monkey skeleton is in love.
At first, Burns is unable to get through the burning wood blocking the door, but seeing Gloria in trouble, he somehow finds the strength to charge inside and save her. Or, well, he tries, anyway.
He did it! He saved her! Well, the important thing is they're both safe.
However, despite his heroic efforts, or at least his heroic attempts, Gloria ends up accidentally falling for Snake again anyway when she talks about all of his negative qualities. Though if you ask me, it sounds like Burns dodged a bullet if that's the kind of woman Gloria is. Oof. So Burns walks home with the Simpsons family while wondering what he needs to do to win over a woman like Gloria. He suggests that maybe he needs to grow a devil beard, sparking a lively debate between them.
You mean a Van Dyke?
No, a Van Dyke has a mustache, doesn't it?
I think it can.
Are you talking about a soul patch?
No! Wait, maybe.
And then the episode ends. So much for finding true love just because a fortune cookie said you would, right? Or wait, maybe that's actually a stupid idea after all. Either way, Burns won't be searching for love in this next episode. Well, not physical love anyway. Instead, he's going to get a dose of love from the Lord. Yes, I'm being serious. Our next Burns-centric episode is American History Excellent, which sees Mr. Burns actually go to jail over stolen valuables being found in his home, unlike 2 episodes ago. Only this episode is full of Stephen King references, and who doesn't love those? We see 3 guards enter a cell in Springfield Penitentiary to harass a seemingly random prisoner, who turns out to be Mr. Burns.
Surprised? Me see Montgomery Burns locked up like an animal? What caused this puzzling turn of events?
Not wasting any time getting into the story in this one, are we? We then flash back to a few weeks earlier, where Burns is hosting the first annual 4th of July celebration at the plant. Unfortunately for the employees, they are being forced to work as the staff for the celebration, and without any extra pay either. After Burns makes them perform an entire musical that he's written about the birth of America, Homer, Lenny, and Carl decide to have their own party in Burns' private wine cellar.
I don't know. Technically, this is trespassing.
What's the worst thing he could do?
And because these 3 are, well, let's just be honest, they're total drunks, they soon get completely wasted and start trashing Burns' mansion. Mr. Burns demands that Smithers call the police, but when the cops actually arrive, Lou recognizes that one of Burns' paintings was stolen back in the 90s, so instead, they arrest Burns.
After all my years of stock jobbing, gun running, attempted murder, successful murder, and tompeepery, they get me on a petty multi-million-dollar art theft.
As he's taken inside the prison, Burns tells Smithers that he'll be in charge of the power plant in his absence. Burns is then stripped of his belongings, his own clothes, and gets processed just like any other common criminal. I guess justice really is blind, as long as you're in a cartoon and not real life. And while Burns is settling into the horrors of sharing a cell with a Dartmouth graduate, Smithers begrudgingly accepts his new role as boss of the power plant.
Damn it.
But Smithers sees this as an opportunity to make things at the plant a little more employee-friendly. So he begins introducing new things, like basic employee health care plans. There's gotta be a catch for that, right? And while Burns is having a terrible time in prison,
Warden, help me!
No handle, baby. I'm not coming down for days.
Smithers thinks that he's earning the respect and friendship of his underlings as the new boss, up until he overhears the truth from Homer and the guys.
There's nothing sweeter than being nice to a guy's face and then stabbing him in the back the minute he walks away.
So now the 3 guys are being put to work harder than ever before, while Burns has to endure a more surprising experience.
And you can't escape the word of Jesus Christ. Burns, you shall reject Satan.
Why can't you reject your guy?
That's right, Burns gets converted into Christianity. I wonder if there's some reason why a lot of guys in prison always turn to religion. Anyway, after having to endure the latest wave of punishments from Smithers, who's now releasing Wolverines instead of hounds, the guys come up with a plan to break Burns out of jail.
Oh, hey, come on. Oh, you can't really be serious about breaking him out.
It's too late to turn back, Mo. We've exchanged meaningful looks.
So, we get back to the beginning of the episode, now knowing that the 3 guards are Homer, Lenny, and Carl. Apparently, they had no trouble at all getting inside the prison, even though it's a prison. But they do have trouble when the ripped prisoner who converted Burns tries to stop them.
You're not leaving with that man. He's born again, been baptized in a toilet sink.
Everyone doesn't have to know that part.
But despite the fact that Homer and his friends are idiots, and also the fact that this isn't how prison works, Burns does agree to leave with them, and so he leaves the large prisoner on good terms. As the episode ends, Burns reveals he has a photo of themselves in his wallet, and he hopes that he can find another lost lamb for his flock.
Tell me, brother, have you heard the story of Jesus Christ?
Well, I am Italian, but no.
And while the episode does end with a sort of nice message, Something tells me that the whole religion thing isn't gonna stick for Burns. But at least they tried, right? But hey, enough about trying to find internal peace through religious means, because you know what's even better than that? Stealing toys from children, which is sort of mostly the plot of Rosebud, the next episode we'll be looking at. And no, it isn't a sled in this case. Mr. Burns is having a nightmare about his childhood, on the day he was separated from his biological parents.
Happy? Would you like to continue living with us, your loving natural parents? Or would you rather live with this twisted, loveless billionaire? Let's roll!
Actually, doesn't care about his parents. He cares about his teddy bear, Bobo, which he left behind on that fateful day. Mr. Smithers hears him saying Bobo in his sleep and tries to ask, but Burns just brushes him off.
On another topic, the preparations for your birthday have begun.
I won't get what I really want.
No one does.
While Burns' birthday plans are getting wrapped, he watches Homer struggle to get a coat hanger out of the back of his shirt and his pants, and decides that Homer should do stand-up comedy at his party. Homer, again, being an idiot, decides that he should do a comedy roast of Burns. So it soon comes time for the big event, but Burns can't think about anything besides Bobo. Luckily, it's time for Homer's comedy show.
A small puppy, not unlike Lassie, was just run over in the parking lot. And now it's time for the comedy stylings of Homer Simpson.
Somehow, after an introduction like that, Homer isn't off to a great start. So he decides to pull out the big guns. An impression of Mr. Burns, accompanied by a big frowny face Homer painted on his butt. Burns reacts how you might expect.
I think I'm so big. Blah, blah, blah.
Destroy him.
Blah, blah, blah. Look at me. Bow!
With that, Burns ends the party by having the people attending the show beaten up by riot police. Classic Mr. Burns. After the party, Burns goes through his possessions, including the legendary sword of Excalibur and the only existing nude painting of Mark Twain. But all he wants is Bobo, and we see what's happened to the bear since it was abandoned. After it passes around from owner to owner,
This is all your fault!
the toy bear eventually arrives at the North Pole on top of a submarine, where it eventually is accidentally collected by men who deliver a bunch of ice to the Quickie Mart.
You've got to start selling this for more than $1 a bag. We lost 4 more men on this expedition. If you can think of a better way to get ice, I'd like to hear it.
Coincidentally, this happens right before Bart arrives to get some ice for Homer's head injury from the birthday party, and he just so happens to grab the bag with the beat-up old teddy bear inside.
Hey, it's a teddy bear. Ugh, gross. It's probably diseased or something. Here, Maggie.
Smithers tries to cheer up Mr. Burns by dressing up as Bobo, which is weird enough, but we're just gonna look past it for now. But instead, Burns orders that the real Bobo be found. So Smithers begins advertising for Bobo's recovery, be it by covering Milhouse's face on missing kid milk cartons, or through the news.
It could be in your house. You could be looking at it right now. It could be right in front of your face as I'm saying this.
It takes a lot of extra help, but eventually, Homer finally notices the truth that's been right under his nose after he fell down the stairs.
How long have we had these fish? Wait, the bear. Burns' bear.
The whole family gathers to investigate the bear, and after Lisa finds a tag that says Bobo on it, they discuss what they should do.
I think we should just give him the bear that he cherishes so much.
Eventually, Homer goes to negotiate with Burns, who says he's strapped for cash. As literal gold rains down on him through a hole in the ceiling, Homer rejects the first offer, trying to wait Burns out. But it doesn't take long for him to crack.
I gotta call Burns. I gotta call Burns.
His family stops him, and Burns agrees to give Homer $1 million in exchange for the bear. But when Homer tries to take the bear away from Maggie...
Here you go, Meg. The deal's off, Mr. Burns. The bear stays here.
Turns out not even $1 million is worth making your daughter cry. That's actually kind of sweet, isn't it? So, of course, Mr. Burns and Mr. Smithers then try to steal the bear.
Howdy, gents. What can I diddly do you for?
But they get stuck when trying to zip line between houses, and Marge has to call the fire station to help them down. So, the next night, the two men try sneaking along the ceilings with suction cups. But then Homer comes in for his midnight snack, an entire 64-pack of American cheese slices.
Have you been up all night eating cheese?
I think I'm blind.
Good day to you.
There wasn't even a purpose behind that, he just did it. Homer later feels upset, but Marge is proud of him for thinking about Maggie. However, just as Homer is making peace with his choice, things take a dramatic turn while he's watching children's shows with Maggie.
Give me my bear, Simpson. Give it to me.
It turns out that not only has Mr. Burns taken over every TV station in Springfield, but he's also diverted all beer deliveries to the town. And he tells everyone in Springfield to take it up with Homer if they have a problem with it. But Homer seems to be taking it well, especially when Burns and Smithers start doing their own show, for some reason.
Smithers, I'm home.
Is it my imagination or is TV getting worse?
It's about the same.
But everyone else in Springfield quickly has enough, and a bunch of people, including Homer's own friends and even Marge's sisters, storm the Simpsons' house to get Bobo themselves. Luckily, not even an angry mob is strong enough to withstand the power of a sad baby.
What have we become?
We've given the word mob a bad name.
So they give Bobo back to Maggie and decide to go sing at the hospital instead. Boy, being a mob in Springfield sounds fun, doesn't it? With everything else failing, Mr. Burns is reduced to desperate measures.
Simpson, look what you've reduced me to.
Please, please.
But Homer says that the bear isn't his, it's Maggie's. So Burns goes to the backyard to try and work something out with Maggie.
Beaten by an infant. What could be more humiliating?
What a scoop!
Finally, Mr. Burns decides to give up. He starts walking away, but Maggie stops him and gives him Bobo, and Mr. Burns is finally happy.
Marge, I'm confused. Is this a happy ending or a sad ending?
It's an ending, that's enough.
But since that ending would be a little too boring, here's part of Mr. Burns' dream where he imagines finding Bobo in a weird Planet of the Apes future.
Bobo, I know I say this every century, but I'll never leave you behind again.
Wait for me, sir.
See, now that's how you end an episode. And, coincidentally enough, this gag ending sorta helps us segue into the next episode on today's list. No, this episode doesn't take place in a Planet of the Apes-style future, sorry. But it does feature Mr. Burns, robots, and the town nearly being taken over by a metal menace. So I think you'll be happy either way with them robot. There is an afternoon announcement from Mr. Burns, who announces a plant-wide company physical exam next Monday. Homer isn't concerned, up until Burns says that any positive tests for narcotics will result in getting fired immediately. And according to federal law, alcohol counts as a drug.
I told him to make these tracks dope-proof.
How can alcohol be a drug? You drink it, you don't smoke it. That totally means it's different, right guys? That means that Homer has to go a whole weekend without drinking. And thanks to chugging down entire bottles of antidepressants, he at least makes it till Sunday before he unwittingly drinks several mimosas while at lunch with Marge's sisters. So when Monday rolls around, Homer is left panicking over his test and resorts to asking God to help him weasel out of his own mess. Again.
Now to mumble in a religious fashion. Dear God, oh Lord, oh God, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh God, oh Lord Almighty.
Unfortunately for Homer and everyone else, their test results don't matter, since Mr. Burns is annoyed at having to cover each individual employee's tests. So annoyed that he does what any good employer would do, and replaces everyone with robots.
Comic-Con nerds! You fool, these are robots.
But after firing nearly everybody, Smithers tells Mr. Burns that they need to keep one human employee to sign for packages, and to be a scapegoat for meltdowns. You know, things that would waste a robot's time. Obviously, that one remaining employee ends up being Homer.
As it turns out, there is one job available, but be forewarned, it promises naught but soul-crushing boredom.
And you did hear me right when I said one employee, because not even Mr. Smithers is safe from being replaced by a robot.
I can do that.
What about this?
At this point, we could almost just call this video 10 times Smithers got bullied for no reason. Poor guy. Homer eventually breaks one of the robots while playing chair gondola and discovers that robots can talk. He just needs to switch the function on first.
I just have to press this button, right? Well, at least it doesn't feel pain. Wait a minute. Go!
But while Homer, after many, many attempts, is able to make friends with his new robot co-workers,
friendship cannot exist between man and machine, but I can simulate interest in your statements.
You're not a friend. You're my best friend.
The rest of Springfield citizens are suffering from crippling unemployment due to Mr. Burns and his robots.
Hey, check it out. Lenny's hit a new low.
I don't want my window washed.
Too late.
Although, this doesn't really make any sense. Why is the pizza place going out of business? Burns doesn't own that part of... forget it. After a while, Homer wants to go to Moe's with the robots, but learns that they can't move off of the yellow guidance lines on the floor around the power plant, even though we saw them doing that a little bit earlier. Come on, animators, make up your minds. So Homer spray paints yellow lines on the ground outside so he can play baseball with the robots.
Actually, I'm the designated hitter for all you guys.
The designated hitter corrupts the purity of an otherwise elegant game. Illogical.
But this ultimately leads Homer to trying to catch a home run by running into a nearby street, forcing one of the robots to push him out of the way of an oncoming truck. Again, so much for the yellow lines thing.
Our primary directive is to preserve human life.
And here I was waiting till you slept to rob you of your copper.
And then, after Homer has to be saved from another truck...
Such a peaceful end. Oh, jeez!
And then several more car accidents. Homer and the family host a funeral for the destroyed robots in his backyard, where he burns their remains while Lisa plays her saxophone. But this leads to a new problem after Homer tries to raise a beer and toast to the fallen robots.
What the?
Alcohol is harmful to humans.
Yeah. Save your breath.
We have no breath.
Annoyed, Homer tries to give the robots robobotomies to make them more compliant, using Ned's power drill, of course. But this only leads to their primary directive being turned off, and replaced with their secondary directive, removing all impediments to the power plant.
Homer, I'm afraid this is the part of God's perfect plan where you're murdered by robots.
Flanders, I don't judge a robot by the color of their eyes, and...
And before he knows it, Homer is forced to flee for his life from his army of murderous robots. Well, they only want to kill Homer, so it's not that bad for everyone else.
Dad, they can only go 3 miles an hour!
I'm doomed!
Homer flees to Mr. Burns' mansion to try and get help, and to his credit, Burns does attempt to stop the robots.
There's one thing man has that machines can never match. Hounds!
But then Mr. Burns angers the hounds as well, so now the two men have to flee from killer robots and vicious hounds. Usually it's Homer who says something stupid like that. They try to find a hiding place, but they just end up cornering themselves in the solarium, and soon get surrounded by robots. Homer tries to fight back, but it's no use.
Stop brandishing me.
Sorry.
But right before they get killed by the robots, Homer and Burns are suddenly saved by all of the unemployed and underemployed people from around Springfield. And in a rare act of goodwill from him, Burns is thankful enough to hire all his employees back as temps. And so the episode comes to an end, but not before the last remaining robot kills itself to get out of dealing with Homer's stupidity.
Oh, this is a life. Hey.
Alright, admittedly, that episode didn't have quite as much to do with Mr. Burns as it did with the consequences of his actions. So we'll get things back on the right track with our final 2 episodes on this list, which both come from Season 8. They must have been on a particular Burns kick that season. Up next is one of my personal favorite episodes, Mountain of Madness, where Mr. Burns forces his employees to race up a mountain which, shockingly, leads to disaster for himself and Homer. And then, of course, we get the madness. The story begins with Mr. Burns coming into work excited to start a new day, only to quickly become bored with sitting around and doing nothing. So he decides to spice things up with a safety drill.
But what kind? Meltdown alert? Mad dog drill? Blimp attack? I think a good old-fashioned fire drill today.
But instead of leaving in an orderly fashion or anything like that, all the employees either begin panicking or fighting each other once the fire alarm sounds.
What's a good time for a mass evacuation of the entire plant?
45 seconds.
And what's our time so far?
I don't know, sir. This stopwatch only goes up to 15 minutes.
Lucky for them, this was only a drill, eh? Mr. Burns decides that all of his employees need a serious lesson in teamwork, so he orders all the employees to come on a mountain retreat. And then there's Homer and his family.
I cannot overemphasize the dangers which... Did you bring your family, Simpson?
Yes, sir. I thought I was supposed to.
Imbecile.
As Burns explains that everyone will form 2-man groups to try and find a cabin somewhere in the mountain, it almost sounds like they're gonna have fun. So Burns quickly fixes that idea.
Hey, this sounds like fun.
And the last team to arrive will be fired.
Uh-oh.
Smithers begins pairing everyone off using names drawn from a hat, and to his surprise, Homer gets paired up with Mr. Burns. Homer realizes this means he can't possibly be fired now, while poor Smithers is left all by himself as the race begins.
Why, if you were here, I'd kick you right in your bony old behind! Bony old behind! Bony old behind!
Thank you, Simpson. I have been watching my figure.
But if that wasn't bad enough, soon he encounters Bart and Lisa, who he reluctantly lets come along with him. Because who better is there to help you climb a mountain than 2 random kids?
Wait, what comes after 12?
1.
No, after 12.
Ugh.
Elsewhere, Homer has a far easier time when Burns convinces him to cheat, and the two use a snowmobile to reach the cabin. And since they're already at the finish line, the two decide to relax with heating, electricity, and reasonably priced champagne. Champagne that soon becomes their downfall.
Hey, did you hear something?
No.
Did I?
I don't know.
Even with the cabin now being buried under a lot of snow, Homer and Burns still keep their spirits up, and soon enough, Homer even manages to dig their way to the surface. And then they go and do it again.
Huzzah!
And now the two men are really trapped, but not trapped enough, so here's a few more avalanches for good measure.
I think they stop.
While Burns and Homer try to think of what they should do, the other employees begin gathering at a different cabin up on the mountain. Smithers and the kids arrive at last, and Smithers is annoyed since he thinks he's lost his job. But then Carl reveals that Homer and Burns still haven't shown up.
Mr. Burns is still out there?
What about our dad?
Don't you just hate it when your father gets lost on a mountain along with his billionaire boss? Back in the buried cabin, Burns and Homer build snowmen to pass the time. And then they take off their clothes to dress the snowmen with, because obviously they need something to wear. And as some park rangers help the others realize that the other cabin has been buried by avalanches, Homer and Burns only start going a little crazy. Just a tiny bit.
It's showtime! Give me the gun!
But during their fight, Burns accidentally cracks open the propane tank that got lodged in the back of the cabin, causing it to act like a rocket that sends them flying out of the snow and down the mountain.
We'll be dashed to pieces.
Oh Lord, protect this rocket house and all who dwell within the rocket house.
That's how propane works, right? Yeah, I think so. Luckily, the rocket burns out right as the cabin reaches everyone else, and the story reaches its happy ending.
Once you've been through something like that with a person, you never want to see that person again.
You said it, you weirdo.
Well, happy enough anyway. I guess the moral of this story is know where all the exits are during a fire drill? Yeah, that sounds about right to me. But if Burns thought getting buried alive with Homer was bad, he's gonna deal with something far worse in this next episode. His daughter. And no, not the one who shot him that one time. So with that said and done, we'll move on to the final episode in today's video, The Old Man and the Lisa, where Mr. Burns will have to face the greatest nightmare that any man can endure, being lower to middle class. Things get started with the rest of the Simpsons family being woken up by Lisa early in the morning, as she's loudly sorting various recyclable products to help raise funds for a school trip to Albany. Is that Albany, New York, or Albany Park, Chicago? Later at school, while they're gathering up all the recycling, Principal Skinner brings in Mr. Burns as a special guest to speak to the children about what makes a good businessman.
Family, religion, friendship. These are the 3 demons you must slay if you wish to succeed in business.
Since this is supposed to be a class about recycling, Lisa asks whether his plant, recycles. Apparently he's never heard of the term, so Lisa tries to explain. But Burns says that Mother Nature doesn't need any helping hands. When Lisa obviously disagrees, this shocks the old man.
How dare you question Mr. Burns?
I'll handle it, Smithers. Shut up, little girl.
Mr. Burns tries to brag that he knows better, as he's worth $200 million. But Lisa points out from a recent biography that he's only worth $100 million. And Smithers adds that even that number is outdated. Doesn't this poor old millionaire have it hard enough? So Burns gathers up his lawyers and checks his stock ticker, only to make some startling discoveries about what's been happening since he last checked.
Smithers, why didn't you tell me about this market crash?
Well, sir, it happened 25 years before I was born.
Oh, that's your excuse for everything.
Burns tries to make some aggressive moves to earn his money back, but what he doesn't yet realize is that all of his lawyers are spineless yes-men too afraid to tell him when he's wrong.
That should set things right again, eh, boys?
Yes, sir.
So Burns ends up losing everything, and the bank takes away not just the power plant, but even his mansion. But at least Bret the Hitman Hart got a good deal on the place.
Ooh. This place got old man stink.
Don't listen to him, sir. You've got an enchanting musk.
And in the words of Bret Hart himself, watching this episode back, don't feel sorry for him. This leaves Burns forced to live out of a suitcase in Smithers' apartment. Burns tries to make himself useful by getting some of Smithers' shopping done for him.
Ketchup, 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 ketchup. I'm in way over my head.
Do people these days even remember when it was called catsup? Because I didn't. But all of his trouble with buying groceries results in the store clerks kicking him out and sending him to the retirement home. Because nobody has more power in Springfield than supermarket employees.
Relax, you've gone off your nut, so we're stuffing you into an old folks' home. Those store guys sign the commitment papers.
But I'm shopping.
Burns' suffering in the retirement home doesn't last long, though, as he quickly recognizes Lisa's voice when she comes around looking for more stuff she can recycle.
You, the troublemaking girl.
My name is Lisa, Mr. Burns. Lisa Simpson.
It doesn't matter what your name is, you idiot.
Mr. Burns tries to ask Lisa to help him make his money back, but she refuses, saying that he's the worst man in the world, which he naturally assumes is a compliment. After Burns tries asking for her help multiple times, and after a timely reference to the 1960s sitcom That Girl, Burns shows up at the Simpson house to try groveling one last time.
If I did agree to help you, you could only earn money by doing good, socially responsible things. Nothing evil.
It seems like foolishly being nice to a scumbag like Burns is a trait that runs in the entire Simpson family. This leads Lisa to try and show Burns responsible ways to make money, like recycling, and maybe she can teach him something good along the way.
You have to cut these six-pack holders up, otherwise fish get trapped in them.
I see.
And with her help, Burns goes on to start collecting recyclable garbage from around Springfield to slowly make back his fortune. And as the news reports about how sad his life has become, it seems Lisa is the only one who feels bad for him now.
You guys shouldn't laugh at him. Mr. Burns has changed. He's different now.
Yeah, he's broke.
Funny how that works, isn't it? Soon after getting some help from the old folks, Burns opens up a brand new recycling plant, and since he attributes all of his success to Lisa's encouragement, he even names it Lil Lisa's Recycling Plant in her honor.
Oh, ain't that cute? Makes Lil Debbie look like a pile of puke.
Don't worry, it's not nearly as cute as it seems. Because while the entire plant is made out of recyclable materials, so is the big secret behind Mr. Burns' success. A fishing net made out of 1 million plastic six-pack rings, which he uses to sweep the sea clean. Lisa watches in horror as the sea animals are chopped and smashed into Lil Lisa's patented animal slurry, which is made from 100% recycled animals. And she realizes that Mr. Burns is still as evil as ever.
I'm supplying it to them at a tidy profit, and not a single sea creature was wasted. You inspired it all, little Lisa.
Lisa runs away in horror and tries to stop people from recycling since now it's only helping Burns, but it's too late, and to her horror, the animal slurry is already being sold in bulk. So all she can do is go home as the horror of what she's helped do sets in.
A fool to help that horrible old man.
I hope you learned your lesson, Lisa. Never help anyone.
But to make matters worse, Mr. Burns comes by to inform the family that he's just sold the slurry plant for $120 million, and that Lisa is entitled to 10% of those profits as Burns' business partner, which, if you look at it as an isolated incident, actually is kind of nice of him to do, sorta. But Lisa isn't sure if she's able to take Burns' blood money, so she looks to her mother for advice.
Lisa, you do whatever your conscience tells you.
So, with that in mind, Lisa rips the check in half, and Marge tells her how proud she is of her daughter for doing the right thing, while Homer proceeds to have 4 simultaneous heart attacks.
Dad, 10% of $120 million isn't $12,000. It's...
Code blue. Code blue.
And then the episode ends. But don't worry, Homer will bounce back from this, won't he? Anyway, that's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, and maybe subscribe while you're at it.